I think there's a lot of belief and a lot of faith and a lot of willingness for both sides to come together. But no one, either in their leadership or ours, is actually saying, okay, let's promote these ABCD nonprofits. Let's get some European, US funding into the education system in extracurricular programs. Let's teach them what it is to be the other side. And some projects are out there. I'm not saying that they're not, but there is no political backing for that.
Right.
And if you don't mind just commenting on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I'm very, it's very obvious, I'm very pro grassroots activities, and I think it's very, very important. I was asked today, and I'm asked all the time, what would make the change? I think economic relationships really make a difference. You see, education really makes a difference. Not just the fact that people are getting educated. It doesn't really matter, it's not that this education is not important, but the fact that people are educated. You see so many women in Nazareth building startups these days. It's amazing. I invite you, I applaud you, really, please go to Nazareth. You would see amazing things. And considering the fact that women, Druze women, for instance, were not allowed to drive just up until recently. So we're going somewhere. Just sometimes it's taking too much time. About a month ago, a 13-year-old kid, Palestinian kid, took a knife. Instead, a 13-year-old Israeli on his bikes, going to one of his extracurricular activities. 13-year-old kid, Israeli kid, is still hospitalized in a very bad state. I keep thinking about it, the different narratives. Our Independence Day is their Nakba. I'm not able to join hands with that. I'm not able, it's not that I don't respect their narrative. Being Zionist, I don't feel that not at this point, maybe at a later point, I'm not able to implement it in our school program. I do think that culture must be taught our poets, which is not easy right now, because a lot of it is very nationalist. But learning the language itself, I think it's very, very important to cultivate some kind of cooperation. Obviously, I agree with you in that respect that a lot of Palestinians don't know Israelis at all. A lot of Arabs, even though they live next to Israelis, don't really know them, and vice versa, God knows. I tell my friends about Jews. I'm very, very close with the Jewish community in Israel. They're an amazing community. They have such strong ties with Israel. Nobody, very few people know about it. So how do you challenge yourself with the different narratives? I can tell you that sitting in Parliament, and I'm trying to listen to the speeches of the Joint List, I think it's very troubling. They are Palestinian Israelis, or Israeli Palestinians, or Israeli Arabs, depends on the day they wake up in the morning and the way they wake up in the morning. And all they're concerned about is Palestinians. They're not concerned at all with their community within Israel. They offend me. They offend me. They offend me. They offend my peers. I don't offend them. Some MKs would offend them. No, that's the truth. But then you feel like you're in a kindergarten. And I do feel like I'm in a kindergarten sometimes. That's the conflict of being in a parliament. Sometimes the only consolation I get is when I look at the British Parliament sometimes. So you get consoled by the fact that others are worse than you, but yeah, we know what consolation, what it's worth, for all it's worth. So we need to find more ways to promote these NGOs. With that, I agree. I can tell you, unfortunately, for instance, the Minister of Justice in Israel is at the moment readdressing a bill that was not passed in prior parliaments, calling for transparency in funding of countries' projects in Israel. So what Bushi Herzog said, rightfully so, he said, no problem, but transparency has to work both ways, because a lot of foreign funds are funding the purchases of houses of Arabs and projects that are very, very nationalist and very to the verge of being fascist. So it has to work both ways. Transparency, fine. We have respect for transparency, but it has to work both ways. So sometimes I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, okay, that's a bad way. That's a bad way. But it is challenging because, as I said, when you see a 13-year-old boy being stabbed, and his, his parents sending him on his bikes, to his extracurricular activity, and I went to the hospital when the knives were very strong. I went to the hospital and I met the Haviv family, whose father was assassinated and their mother was in intensive care. They were about to leave for their father's funeral. It's terrible. You just go out in the morning and you're not sure whether or how you're going to return to your home. Richard Lakin, who died last week from his wounds after being wounded very, very badly in the bus, also about a month and a half ago. And he was a peace activist. He was a peace activist, a true peace activist. So they're always challenging. Thank you. We have a question over here. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just noticed it first. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up Richard Lakin. He grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, which is where I'm from originally, and it reminded me of the issue. I have a feeling this sort of connection to Israel, but still from a distance. And one of the things that sort of disappoints and frustrates me recently is the way I feel like Israeli Jews view American Jews. As we don't care about Israel, we don't know about Israel. We're just slaves of Obama, and that's sort of how I get the sense we're viewed as. And I'm just curious if you think there's a way to sort of arrest that trend a bit, because I think you can tell the audience here we really do care.
Yeah. Well, I'm tempted to sing "Summertime," but I'll spare you. Obviously, this has been a challenging year for the relationship between America and Israel, and it's a good opportunity to apologize to you for tearing you apart. Even though I didn't personally do it, but I think it's a good chance to do it. I would say Prime Minister Netanyahu did not always make the right choices. Is that a nice diplomatic way to say it? I think the Iran deal is very, very challenging from the Israeli perspective. I'm very much concerned about the inspection. I don't speak about uranium and plutonium. I don't understand what that is. But my expertise, before I came from the business sector to the parliament, and my expertise was corporate governance. And I'm asking myself whether anything was governed before, not before the agreement was signed, when Saba were going to inspect the nuclear in Iran. But obviously, no question in my heart that President Obama stands by Israel very strongly, very firmly. As I said, Netanyahu did not think, from my perspective, he did not make the right choice in the sense that he tore you apart, in the sense that he tore the world apart, because we expect the world to be on our side. But, and that has nothing to do with America, what I'm going to say next has nothing to do with America, it has something to do with the world. I do feel that the world is hypocritical sometimes when it comes to Israel. And that is frustrating picture. You see, we're very, very close to Syria, right? Nobody's thinking about labeling Syria's products. Everybody's ignoring the massacre, the genocide that's going on there. Millions of people being slaughtered, and the world is at a hush. Everybody's letting Putin run the show. That is terrible. That is terrible. You see the Security Council obsessing about Syria? I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening, and I truly regret that because I feel so sorry for the Syrian for Syrian citizens fleeing away. Look at what's going on in Europe with the refugees. No, we're not at our best behavior, okay? Let's say we're not perfect. Far from it, okay? Is there any kind of comparison? But no, let's label the products from Israel. Let's label the products from the territories. That is, by the way, from my perspective, the worst way to fight or to push Israel to go forward with any kind of peace process. Going back to you. What's your name, by the way?
Dan.
Yeah. I think it's not just we need America. I think America needs us, not even kind of, I'm not saying, oh, you need us too, because we're the only democracy in the Middle East. No. I think we share the same values, the same core values. We don't always practice them the same way. But America is also, I don't say America is not perfect. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but America is not perfect. It is also a fragmented society going through several challenges. When I'm frustrated about Israel, I go to the end of the 1950s in America and the beginning of the 1960s, even before Kennedy was assassinated, which is obviously a huge tragedy in American history. But I keep saying to myself, okay, in America, in the 1950s, black people still had to sit in the back of the bus. Look where we are. So every time I'm frustrated by the course of history, that's what I remind myself. That's what I remind myself. That it did take a little bit of time, but look where we are. So that gives me a lot of hope. And I'm very, very hopeful towards the meeting of Prime Minister Netanyahu with Obama next week on Tuesday. Probably know also Jonathan Pollard is going to be released from prison after 35 years on November 20th. This is also something that had a very, very major shadow on the relationship between Israel and America for many, many years. So, although still challenging, and this coming year, you have, by the way, the best campaign I've ever seen. This is like the best joke ever. So, watching that surface, I do ask myself, what will Obama do in respect to his expectations from Israel in regards to Palestinians? That is still a question from my perspective. I don't know what he's going to be able to do. Because if he wants to root for Hillary Clinton, I don't know how strong he will push Netanyahu. And that's, that's not so good. On the other hand, he really wants, if he wants to help her. So, challenging. Yeah, hopeful. Thank you, Dan. Great question.
My name is Alona, and
I'm not sure.
my name's Alona, and let's see, contextually, I'm the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. My entire one side of my family is still in Israel, but here in America, I'm a liberal, and I have a part of my family here in America who's very Zionist and a little radical. So I'm right now soul searching, trying to figure out where do I stand on these issues. And I find myself in a very difficult place because I'm also a centrist. I want peace, but there's also the real fear of, what happens after peace? Is it real? The trust, and I'm constantly not fighting with my uncle, but he's so one of the things that really is what I'm wondering is I don't think that a lot of people understand what they're fighting about. And so he has said to me that the Palestinian idea, the people, is a fabrication. That they came, that it's just recent in the 40s and the 50s, and you know,
1964 to be exact.
okay, so I don't know that to be true though. You know, I really, you know, so my question to you is like, so you say 1964, but I'm going through my own research and find that that's not necessarily true. So where do we find the truth? Everybody has their own truth. It's very, very difficult. Their history is written in different places correctly, and no one can say, oh, I'm right, and it's written here, because the other person can say, well, the fact is that it's here, and it could take years for us to prove each other correctly, you know? So it is very, very
Thank you
difficult
for
work.
the interesting and complex question. Thank you. I do, no, seriously. The PLO was established in 1964. There were Arabs in Israel, in Zion, or in Palestine, depends on the narrative. Before that, way before that, my grandparents were in Safed in 1777. They lived next to the Arabs. They spoke fluent Arab. Okay, there was not an issue, except for a few pogroms. Nothing was, you know, nothing was too bad. It's true. It's true. That is challenging. But what that was why what Rabin decided to do in the 1993 Oslo Accords initially was so great, because he decided to kind of waiver any kind of context. There weren't Palestinians, there were Palestinians, you know. He said, you know, just give that all away, give that up, that discussion, put it away, put it aside. No relevance, sort of. He didn't like Arafat. Oh my God, he did not like him. But he decided that something needs to be done. You know, there's something about Israel, you know, about the neighborhood that we're in, that if you get stuck in the mud and you don't pull yourself out of the mud, you just get stuck and stuck and stuck. You know, like what do they call them? The swamps in the south. Quicksand or no, the Mississippi. So if you just get stuck and stuck, you know, that's the Middle East. That's one of our problems with the fact that no negotiations are taking place in the past years. Because I think that's very much not to the benefit of Israel, in the sense that I don't want anybody to twist my arm. I don't want anybody to twist my arm. Unless it's nice and not painful, which is usually not the case. You know, in South Africa, after the apartheid, they did something very, very brave. I don't think we're going to be able to do that, because it's a different situation. And I spoke at length to African journalists just very recently in Israel. They had a huge delegation coming to Israel, journalists from all over Africa. It was fascinating to listen to them, not just to speak with them, but to listen to them. And in South Africa, they had a committee that was called Reconciliation and the Truth. And basically what they were doing was kind of clearing the air, speaking about everything that went on during the years of apartheid. We're not there. I don't think we'll be able to be there, because it's different. You know, this was really people. It's different. It's a different situation. It's a different situation. But you know, if I'm allowed to dream, you know, everybody will give up their own claims in the sense that we will be able to be a safe Jewish country, a safe Jewish state, democratic. They will have their own state. It's not that I'm rooting for the two-state solution. I just don't see any other solution. Someone asked me today, could you know, if you could portray to the right wing, what would a binational state would mean demographically? I'm not able to portray it to them, because, you know, I understand it's Professor Shlomo Ben-Ami was recently here. He was a minister in the Israeli government many years ago, and a professor of Palestine, one of the most important ones. And he said, you know, if you want to know what a binational country is the kniving